The Baltimore Ravens face off with the New Orleans Saints in Week 9 of the 2022 season in prime time. We dive into a full game preview coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here, as always, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, including over on YouTube. And be sure to follow along with us in audio form if you're here with us there. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Also be sure if you're here on YouTube in video form, like this video, subscribe to the channel. It does help out a ton. We put out content 5 days per week, Monday through Friday, Ravens content. So if you want Ravens news, analysis, updates, and more, we're here for you. Also, today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times the money on your entry. First time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. And it is game day. Monday Night Football coming up here between the Ravens and the Saints. Last game of Week 9, and then we're in that halfway point. The Ravens will enter their bye in Week 10, and hopefully they can do it on a 3-game win streak. I think it's so important for a team to have that momentum and go into a bye week that way. Because, look, the Ravens have built the momentum up. We've talked about it, how they beat Cleveland in Week 7. They come out really by the skin of their teeth, but you know what? It happens, and the Ravens ended up showing themselves, I think, that, hey, look, we can do this even when stuff goes wrong, as they did give Cleveland a shot to win that game at the very end there. Then in Week 8 against Tampa, starts off very slow, especially for the offense. You kind of have the defense adjust after the first quarter, the offense adjust after the first half. So going now into a game against the Saints, who are banged up in their own right. So is Baltimore, right? Both teams dealing with injuries. If they were able to go into this game and come out with a victory going into a bye week, I think the back half of their schedule, compared to other teams, it is easier, I'd say. You can't guarantee a win or a loss any week, but I think that the Ravens schedule does soften up quite a bit here. So we'll talk about this game here. We'll dive into the injuries. We'll dive into Ravens offense versus Saints defense. We'll dive into Ravens defense versus Saints offense predictions and more. So let's first talk about the injuries. We'll do that first. And a pretty lengthy injury report both ways. Now, Baltimore did make an update on Mark Andrews on Sunday. They did say that he is officially out for the game, did not travel with the team. Look, it doesn't surprise me. The Ravens do have this bye coming up, and I think that they just want to give these guys as much time as they can to rest. And especially, it's hard to gauge, I think, where guys are right now in terms of just how important it is for them to utilize this bye week the right way. So if Mark Andrews needs a couple weeks to recover from the shoulder and the knee thing that's going on, by all means. I mean, I'd much rather have him be out for this game and missed, again, obviously the second half of Tampa, and then be healthy for the rest of the season, as opposed to him kind of trying to force it and play through it and the team putting him out there and then him getting re-injured and having him miss an extended period of time. So Mark Andrews out for this game. Gus Edwards was listed as doubtful. I wouldn't think he plays in this one. I think we'll be seeing the Justice Hill, the Kenyon Drake show. Maybe Tyler Beatty gets called up for this one. I don't know. Mike Davis we'll see, I think, as well. The Ravens wide receiver-wise, a late addition to the report was Demarcus Robinson, and we all know what happened with Rashad Bateman. He's not going to be going in this one, so he's not going to be going in any game for the remainder of the season, unfortunately. But Demarcus Robinson didn't practice, I believe it was the last 2 days here, so that'll be all things considered, with the way the Ravens receiving room looks right now, a pretty big loss that would mean that the top 4 most likely would be Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, Tylan Wallace. At the time of this recording, Deshaun Jackson hasn't been called up yet. I'm assuming he's going to get called up or signed to the active roster or something of that nature. So those will be the top 4 guys, and you kind of got to roll with it that way. But I think we're going to see a heavy dose of Isaiah Likely here. This, I think, will be last week was his breakout, right? We saw the 6 catches, 77 yards, a score, but this will be his first extended action going into a game knowing that he's going to be in there for Mark Andrews. Right? He didn't know he was going to be in there for Mark Andrews. In week 8, Andrews goes down, he comes in, he steps up. So it's about who's going to step up for this team on offense and also who's going to step up on defense. I mean, Ravens don't have a ton of injuries right now. Malik Harrison was a limited participant on Saturday with a foot injury. I would anticipate he goes. Other than that, though, you have Tyus Bowser, who I think is going to come back for this one. Josh Bynes missed week 8. He's likely going to be able to go out there. David Ojabo, he practiced in full all week, much like Bowser and Josh Bynes did. I don't know if the Ravens are going to put him out there. They might want to wait till after the bye with him. I'm not sure. If I had to guess, I'd probably say Tyus Bowser. I'd say Tyus Bowser is out there for week 9, and I would say David Ojabo is out there week 11. That's probably what I'll say there for that one, just to give him that extra time to get back into full football shape. Not that he isn't already, but just to really, really get him there. Other than that, though, you have the mandatory rest days that the Ravens do give their guys. So Ronnie Stanley got a rest day on Saturday. Jason Pierre-Paul got a rest day, and Marcus Peters after a rest day on Thursday practiced in full. So the Ravens, outside of, I think, Bateman, who's obviously done for the season, Andrews, who is out now, and Gus Edwards, and I think DeMarcus Robinson, who actually, it was just one day for him. He didn't practice. He was limited on Friday and did not practice on Saturday. So assuming those 4 guys are the only ones, I would say, look, obviously you want to play with Andrews, you want to play with Edwards, but you also want to give him ample time to heal up. So all things considered, the Ravens injury report is that. Then for the Saints, we're not going to see a Mark Ingram revenge game. Ingram is going to be out in this one with a knee injury. So no Marcus Williams revenge game and no Mark Ingram revenge game, which I want to see those guys go up, not like against each other, but just against their former teams. It's always kind of fun to have those extra storylines in there. Also, Jarvis Landry, he was limited all week. He hasn't played in a while. He's questionable. I guess that means he's trending more in the right direction, but we'll see when the actual inactives come out for him. Marshawn Lattimore is not going to play. He didn't practice all week with an abdomen injury. That's a big loss for them. He is one of the best corners in the game, and with the Ravens being down Rashad Bateman, maybe being down to Marcus Robinson, obviously down Mark Andrews too, the Saints not having Lattimore is a big deal. And with Devin Duvernay playing the way he has been, the Saints still have talented quarterbacks. Paulson Adebo's out there. They have others as well, but Marshawn Lattimore still a very big loss for the Saints defense. Also, Chase Hansen, a linebacker, he didn't practice on Friday and Saturday. He's out with a knee injury. Other than that, though, Saints injury report, it's really Michael Thomas, and that's it for them. Thomas is not going to play seemingly for the rest of the season. He's on IR now, so he'll be out then, so he's not going to play in this one. So the Ravens going through it with Rashad Bateman, receiver-wise. The Saints going through it with Michael Thomas, receiver-wise. But it's going to be a game where it's going to be who will be able to step up, who's going to have the depth pieces, the not necessarily the star players step up. Because I think both teams actually are relatively deep, all things considered. I think they actually are one of the deeper teams in the NFL. I think the Saints are a better team than their record indicates. Now, Andy Dalton has been, I think, a thorn on the Ravens' side for the majority, if not all, of his NFL career. Going back to Cincinnati, that Andy Dalton to AJ Green connection. We'll talk about Dalton more in the final segment. Coming up in the second segment, though, we're going to be diving into the Ravens offense going up against the Saints defense, where these teams match up, what the numbers look like behind it, and everything else, keys of the game and more. So be sure to stay tuned. So a ton to dive into on Locked On Ravens. First, I do want to tell you, though, about PrizePicks. And I actually had a pretty good week in fantasy this week in week 9. I won in most of my leagues, so I'm pretty happy about that. This is kind of like the bye week area where you got to maneuver through the bye weeks. I think I did it pretty well. But if you want a different twist on fantasy, try out PrizePicks. It's super easy to use. I like how easy it is to use and just the different games and formats you can play and how many current entries you can have as well. And how it works is you pick 2 to 5 players. And if they will go score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just your projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including NFL, NBA, MLB, you have NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app. Go to PrizePicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKED ON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget the promo code LOCKED ON to sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker, your host. still hanging out with you here. Thank you so much for tuning in today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen. Again, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow along in audio form as well, and make your second listen today Locked On Sports Today from the games that matter. The most of the biggest stories in sports go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. So, Ravens Saints, Monday Night Football, game day preview here today. We'll dive into a full one. First, let's start off with the Ravens offense. And I think it starts with a key to the game is like, what offense are we going to see, right? Because we saw it was a tale of two halves when you're talking about the Ravens and the Bucs on offense, at least for the Ravens. The Bucs really weren't able to get a ton going outside of the first quarter, I guess. But the Ravens in the first half, and multiple players, multiple coaches have kind of gone into detail about what the game plan was in the first half versus the second half. But they were really trying to spread the Buccaneers out. They were just decimated in their secondary, seeing if they could throw on them a little bit, see what they could get. It obviously didn't work, right? The play calling, I don't think, was there. The execution was not there. So they adjusted. It's the game day adjustments, the in-game adjustments that are so big for me personally, because it shows that you understand what is going on in the game and you can figure out and adjust to different looks you are getting and things you might not be expecting. So in the second half, what do we see? The Ravens start to ground and pound with the pass game sprinkled in there as well. And it worked. It worked really, really well. And I think that is the identity of this team. Not that they can't throw the ball, because I think they can do it, but just to be able to establish that dominance on the ground so consistently in that second half opened up things for the passing offense. The Ravens dominated time of possession. I think against the Saints offense that, it can be explosive. They don't have Michael Thomas, but Alvin Kamara is someone who can put up points. He can break some big plays. Taysom Hill is that jack of all trades guy. If Landry comes back, Chris Olave has been great for them. So they have a lot of players. Jawan Johnson is a tight end. So the Saints offense can score points, and Andy Dalton there has done, it's kind of been like, oh, who should start, Jameis or Andy Dalton? Well, Dalton's been the guy for them, and he's put up numbers. The Saints record just isn't very good right now. So I think the Ravens offense has to be able to control the time of possession in this game. And week 8, the Ravens held the ball at the end of the contest for almost 20 minutes more than Tampa Bay did. So going into week 9 with that same mindset, I think is really good. Now, the key here is, can they do it with Justice Hill and Kenyon Drake, assuming Gus Edwards is officially going to be out for this one, which I do assume he will be. That's going to be a key for me, because at the end of the day, I think for Baltimore, at least, they have the ability. The offensive line has played great this year. It's just about execution, and can the Ravens incorporate other things in there? Can they get creative enough with the play calling to confuse a defense that, again, with no Marshawn Lattimore, it's big for them, but they do have others as well. Tyrann Mathieu signed over there, DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Marcus May, and Paulson Adebo, as I talked about. I'm forgetting a couple others as well. They have talent on that defensive unit, but the defense hasn't necessarily been, I think, that top 5, top 3 unit that so many people expected it to be going into the season. The Saints numbers, if you want to go rush defense and pass defense, they are the 8th ranked pass defense. They've only allowed, I say only, but they've allowed 6.0 net yards per attempt through the air. That is good for 8th. On the ground, though, they're middling. They're the 17th best rush defense, 4.5 yards per carry. So I think that's where you have to start. You understand that, look, even with no Marshawn Lattimore, they have the talent in that secondary and their back end. The Ravens are obviously hurting a bit at wide receiver right now. So I think what you do is you try to establish your dominance on the ground and kind of do like the flip-flop opposite. And it's almost like you don't want to do it too much to the point where you're playing from behind and then you have to abandon the run game and the game script changes, because that you don't want to be pigeonholed into completely eliminating, I'd say, one part of your offense. But if you can try to establish some sort of dominance on the ground, chunk plays, you can use that in the short passing game too, maybe some screen passes, which it's been a while since the Ravens have run a success. Well, I shouldn't say that. They ran one in week 1, and we've seen a couple of iterations of it over the course here. But I do think if the Ravens can incorporate the short passing game, the screen game in early, that will open up things deep for the pass game, especially if they can force teams to, I guess, stack the box against the ground game, because it's working so well. They can use play action off of that really well. They can use Isaiah Likely in those situations. They can use Devin Duvernay with motions, getting the ball in his hands creatively. So that's really, really big for me. But it's about stopping the Saints up front. Can you stop their front 7? Can you neutralize Cam Jordan? They're the big defenders up front. So that's the key there. For the Ravens offense, we'll talk about their numbers now. Baltimore is the number one rushing offense in the league. It doesn't surprise me. They are averaging 5.7 yards per carry on the ground. Not a shock whatsoever. Net yards per attempt through the air, 14th. So they are averaging 6.2 net yards per attempt through the air. So again, I think you have a top rush offense versus a middling run defense, and you have a middling-ish pass offense versus a top pass defense. So that's where I'm saying just go establish the ground game a little bit and also sprinkle in the pass game in there. So there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Saints defense. Again, they do have very talented guys in that secondary. The middle linebacker, Mario Davis, is one of the best ones in there. So you have to kind of look at that. But I think when we're talking about turnovers, the Ravens, it goes both ways. On defense, we'll talk about in the final segment, the Ravens, I think, have to generate turnovers on Andy Dalton. They have to generate some turnovers there. But on offense, protect the football. The Ravens did a good job of doing that against Tampa Bay, and that, I think, was a key turning point over the course of time where the Buccaneers never really got the momentum back in the game after that first quarter, where if the Ravens had given the ball back to Tampa, and we've seen it happen where, the prime example of it is week 6 against the Giants, where Baltimore gives the ball back to the Giants in Baltimore territory. Lamar Jackson with that bad decision to throw the football in the double coverage, that loses them the game effectively. But I think what we're seeing now is Lamar Jackson being a bit more careful with the football, which I would like to continue to see from him, and the Ravens not turning the ball over as much, and especially not in this game against, again, an offense that does have talent. I think that is going to be major for them because of the fact that it just doesn't give them momentum. It doesn't make the defense go back out there maybe on short rest if it's like, oh, the defense just got off the field and then there's a turnover 2 plays later and they have to go back out there. If you control the clock, you can run the football, control the time of possession battle. We've seen it so many times going back to, and look, it's not 2019 anymore. I'm not caught up in the past. I'm just saying we saw it in 2019. That same principle, I think, can be applied to this team with a bit more balance in terms of run pass, because we do understand and we do know how good of a thrower Lamar Jackson is, what he can do with the ball in his arm. He can do everything with his legs. We know that, but he can do a ton with his arm as well. So one of the most dynamic players, both with his arm, with his legs. You want to exploit that if you're the Ravens and get him in situations to make him successful and working with the guys that he has. So stepping up with Devin Duvernay, stepping up with Isaiah Likely, establishing that connection. And for Lamar, key here is without Mark Andrews, he, much like in Tampa, is going to have to look around for other guys, right? He can't just be honed in on one guy here. It has to be a joint effort, both by the wide receivers and by Lamar Jackson. So hopefully that connection we saw between Isaiah Likely and Lamar Jackson will be back in week 9. The connection, if DeMarcus Robinson plays, between those two. James Prochet had a couple nice catches. So you have to have guys establishing themselves with Lamar Jackson. I think that will actually help later in the year when guys like Andrews do come back, where you now have that established connection, not only with Andrews, but with other guys. So if Andrews is taken out of the game and is kind of doubled away by teams or whatnot, you have other guys, and the Ravens will say, all right, fine, you're taking Andrews away. Well, we're just going to go to Isaiah Likely. We're going to go to Devin Duvernay, et cetera, et cetera. So really big for them there. The Saints, though, a very talented team. Definitely a game that I think will be a close one. But in the final segment, we'll dive into predictions and also talking about the Ravens defense going up against Andy Dalton and the Saints offense. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to dive into here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. And BetOnline.net is the number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. I'm a Denver Nuggets guy, so they're playing the Spurs tonight, but the Ravens have a football game, so that takes priority over that, especially because they'll be playing around the same time. So I'm hoping the Nuggets will do me proud while the Ravens are playing. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting up to minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check out on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. So over the website that use more to learn more, BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oshak, your host, still here with you again. Thank you for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Free and available on all podcasting platforms. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, follow along in audio form. But let's talk about the final segment here. Ravens Saints on Monday Night Football. Baltimore's last primetime matchup, actually, before the season ends. Unless there's a flex. There are always the flexes. The Ravens have a lot of TBDs on their schedule right now. So maybe those TBDs will turn into primetime games. Who knows? But regardless, the Ravens will be facing off against New Orleans. We talked about the Ravens offense going up against the Saints defense. Let's flip that. Let's talk about the Ravens defense against the Saints offense. I did mention Andy Dalton. He's had the Ravens number. Cincinnati, he had it multiple times. Going back to Chicago last year, where the Bears almost beat the Ravens in Chicago, and that was almost ugly because of the fourth and short, I think. And Don Martindale puts everybody up at the line, leaves Chris Westry one-on-one. I can't remember the receiver. It was either Darnell Mooney or Marquise Goodwin. I can't remember the Bears receiver, but regardless, Chris Westry is one-on-one with the Bears receiver and gets beat on the meanest double move ever. He bites so hard, and it's a go-ahead touchdown for Chicago. Luckily, the Devonta Freeman ends up punching the ball in the end zone. Ravens legend Devonta Freeman, by the way, Ravens legend. But he is someone who won the game for them because of the fact that Andy Dalton almost beat him. They had to go down the field and score that game-winning touchdown. So Dalton has had the Ravens number now in New Orleans with a bevy of weapons. I talked about Alvin Kamara. He did not score a touchdown up until week 8. He scored 3 of them in week 8. So he's a threat both in the run game and as a pass catcher. In terms of the Saints' offensive stats, let's start with rushing. The Saints are the 7th best rush offense, 5.0 yards per attempt, and they're also the 7th best pass offense. You have 7 with 6.8 net yards per attempt. So 7th in rushing, 7th in passing. They're a good offense. Now, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have played in a lot of high-scoring games this season. So I anticipate this one to be more of a high-scoring game. I usually predict more on the low side, like early mid-20s, but I have it up in the early 30s, mid-20s. But regardless, Dalton is somebody who you have to account for. I think the Ravens can bait him into some turnovers, though. I think that their defense can do that. They have been a high turnover defense this year, one of the best at generating turnovers. They're almost past their 2021 total. So if they can do that, and it's just like we talked about in the second segment, momentum shifts with these turnovers. So if the Ravens can pick off Andy Dalton twice, or if they can force a fumble on a ball carrier here or there, maybe one fumble or one interception, it turns the tides, especially if the Saints are driving, gives the ball back to the Ravens in Ravens territory. If the Saints are just beginning a drive and the Ravens get the ball deep in Saints territory, it can do that. And it's the other way around too, where if the Ravens turn the ball over, it can shift that momentum. But I do think Andy Dalton can turn this football over. He obviously had those 3 interceptions on Thursday night against the Cardinals, 2 straight pick sixes. So if Marcus Williams is playing in this one, I think that I maybe would put a little money on Marcus Williams with an interception, but maybe Kyle Hamilton gets his first. Maybe Marcus Peters can bait Dalton into a bad throw here or there. Well, I wouldn't expect to see any Jameis Winston in this one, who I know is even more susceptible to turnovers, but the Saints are still a very high-powered offense. You always got to account for Taysom Hill, who I know was once called, or Lamar Jackson was once called a budget Taysom Hill, which is just not true whatsoever, and just very weird take, first of all. But regardless, you still have to account for him. He's the do-it-all guy, can throw the ball, can run it. He's that Swiss Army knife for them. Chris Olave is someone who I would have loved to have in Baltimore, but the Saints on that run of wide receivers where Drake London goes, Jameson Williams goes, Garrett Wilson, Olave, and then the Ravens obviously trade Marquise Brown and take Kyle Hamilton. Olave was one of those guys I was thinking, that would have been a great fit, but he's balling for New Orleans right now. Jarvis Landry, again, I mentioned in the first segment, looking like he potentially could come back in this one, so we'll see what the deal is with him. But Baltimore does have to play disciplined football here, and I think I've been really impressed with Mike Macdonald. Now, he's had an adjustment period, hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. I've definitely seen some things that, like end of first half defense and stuff like that I think can be a little bit better, but has improved. And that's the thing with me. He has come over from college, and obviously he was with the Ravens organization for a while, but he's come over from college as a first-time play caller there, comes back to Baltimore as a first-time play caller at the NFL level, and we're seeing a defense, I think, playing with confidence, and we're seeing a defense that now has a new acquisition in Roquan Smith, and also could be getting back Ty Spowers and even potentially David Ajabo. So reinforcements are here. You have Patrick Queen playing really well, Broderick Washington, Justin Madubuike, Calais Campbell, I think, is going to be back here from his illness that he actually had to have surgery to get an infection rid. I think he had to have surgery to get rid of an infection. So this defense is getting healthier. Marcus Williams is going to come back at some point. obviously John Harbaugh said not season ending. So this is a game where if you can establish that momentum on defense and you can continue to dominate, I would say. Now, I want to see consistent football. I want to see a game where the Ravens dominate offense, defense, special teams, full 60 minutes. We saw it in the second half against the Bucs, but I want to see it full 60 minutes. And what a statement it would be to do it in prime time against a not too shabby Saints team. You know, it's not like the Saints are this 0-8 team that haven't played good football this year. You know, their record hasn't been amazing, but regardless, they do have that talent. So I think the Baltimore can really do a lot with this game. I'm predicting it's going to be a Baltimore win. I think Roquan Smith is going to have a really nice debut. It is, I think, going to take a little bit of time to get him fully acclimated, fully caught up to speed here, but he's had the portion of the mini bye to do that. He will then have the bye after this game to do that. But just to get his feet wet in this Baltimore defense, the Ravens can see where he likes to be utilized, and the Ravens can see just what he wants to do and where he can fit in. So him playing against Patrick Queen is going to be great. I think a key matchup to watch is what's that third corner situation going to look like outside of Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. Is Pepe Williams going to get a lot of run? Is Brandon Stevens going to get a lot of runs? So I am predicting a Baltimore win. I'm going to say 30-24. That's my prediction. I think the score might be a little closer than I think it actually is at the end of the game. Maybe the Saints get like a field goal at the end or a late touchdown, but I do think Baltimore is riding that momentum right now and going into their bye week. They know what's coming up. They can't get lazy or lackadaisical because of that. They have to lock in and focus here. This is the second straight week they are traveling to play on prime time in New Orleans. It's a fun city. You know, I was there for the Super Bowl back in 2013, so I'm sure the players, you know, if they stay over for the bye week or do what they can have their fun. But this is game time. You know, you got to lock in for this one. I think they will. I think they'll be prepared. John Harbaugh will have his guys ready. I hope that we will see good performances, not just by the players, but by the coaching staff. Harbaugh, Greg Roman, Mike McDonald, etc. You know, it seems like there's a lot of excitement right now. It seems like this team can be really, really special. And I think if you can, again, have that 3-win streak going into the bye, that is going to be just so massive and so key for a team that was really looking for the consistency, looking for the win streak, because it was the win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. And now that you have this opportunity here, NFC wins are not the be-all, end-all, or NFC losses are not the be-all, end-all of everything, where it's so important to win or lose these games. But every game, every win, you know, if you can add a win to your record, you're going to do it. You want to do it every week. You want to go out there, play hard, win the game. So I understand it's not a divisional matchup. It's not even a conference matchup, but it is regardless still an important game, and the Ravens aren't going to get eliminated from the playoffs as they lose this one. But for the mental aspect of things, for the momentum aspect of things, I do think that it would be in their best interest to go win this game. Not like they're going to go out there and try to lose or anything, but I think Lamar Jackson will pull it off. I think Roquan Smith has a great debut. I think Lamar Jackson does his thing. Devin Duvernay has a likely steps up the plate again, and we see a Ravens victory. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in with me here today. I'm going to get back here tomorrow. I'll be diving into everything that happened in this Ravens and Saints game. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.